Should all games be free to play? I know for some of you, this idea makes you sick to your stomach, but maybe it wouldn't be as bad as you think. Let's be honest, if you love games like I do, you've chosen a very, very expensive hobby. There's a high cost of the consoles themselves or a decent PC, plus an HD television or high definition monitor, but then you also have to throw in the cost of high-speed internet, extra controllers, adapters, cables, doodads, dongles. I mean, eventually you're gonna want one of those omnidirectional treadmills. The list goes on. Okay, you might not need all of those things, although it would be nice, but we're talking at least $400 before you can even think about purchasing the game itself, and those are also expensive. Gaming, and it pains me to say this, trust me, is becoming more and more like golf, where you pay for a bunch of really expensive equipment, then you pay for the game itself or a membership fee before you even get to hit the green. But it's worse than that. If you want to be a cultured gamer, someone who wants to experience all that games have to offer, which is a very laudable goal, you have to own an Xbox One, a PlayStation 4, a gaming PC, a couple different handhelds, and a smartphone. And maybe also a pair of those high-performance gaming glasses all the kids are talking about. As a result, even I don't get to experience all the amazing games that are out there. And it's my job. When we did our Let's Play episode last year, lots of people said that the reason that they watch Let's Play videos is because they can't afford the games themselves. So whether we want to admit it or not, gaming is an elitist hobby. And by elitist, I don't mean snobby, stuffy, pretentious, that sort of thing. What I mean is only those with enough financial means can actually get into it. Which is weird, because games, like other forms of play, started out free. So herein lies the paradox. Games are increasingly becoming a window into contemporary culture. I mean, I wouldn't host Game Show if I didn't think that was the case. But the high cost is keeping more and more people out, and that's a problem. So I was wondering, and hear me out, what if all games were free? In specific, I'm talking about the free-to-play model, where game designers or companies give away the initial game experience for free, but then make money on like premium items, you know, unlocks, levels, that sort of thing. And no, the free-to-play model, as it's currently executed, it isn't perfect. So we'll get to that in a second. Trust me, just put down those pitchforks. But I do think it is the best chance that we have at dealing with gaming's income inequality problem in a very real way. As French economist Thomas Piketty argues in his new book, Capital in the 21st Century, we're entering a new Belle epoch, a period where the cultural and income gap between the haves and the have-nots is wide and is only going to get wider. And those have-nots increasingly won't be able to pay to play new games. I think the question for games as a medium, and this is a really important question, is what side of history will games be on? Will games be a force for equality or disparity? I'll admit that most forms of entertainment have some cost attached to them, right? So you go to the museum, that's probably going to cost you some money. If you want to go to the movies, that's like $15, $20, which is crazy. But games, they have it so much worse because they're so cost prohibitive in the first place. But the free-to-play model can help reduce the outrageous expenses associated with being someone who loves to play games, and it's proven to be effective. It works for developers, as we've seen in the recent IPO of King, who makes Candy Crush Saga, and it also works for players. I mean, normally we associate free-to-play with like casual games, right? Low fare. But recently we've seen games like League of Legends, Team Fortress 2, PlanetSide 2 that use the free-to-play model and are amazing, amazing games. I mean, I'm playing Trials Frontier on my iPhone right now. It's incredible. You should check it out. And it's free to play. Surprise, surprise. The value of free to play is that it shifts an exclusionary art form into something that everyone can experience. And it still makes gobs and gobs of money for game designers and developers who need that to continue to make profitable titles. TLDR, everybody wins. And ultimately, I think this is good for games in the long term as a medium, because for it to succeed as a culture, you have to cast a really wide net. As game theorist Bernie DeKoven says, inclusion is key. The well-played game requires that everyone who wants to play can play. But okay, look, I'll admit it, I know you've all been thinking it, my utopian vision for free-to-play, it has some problems. First and foremost, the term free-to-play is a little bit of a misnomer. I mean, you still need to own a game console or a PC and then have some fancy data plan for your smartphone. I mean, in some cases, you may end up paying more for free-to-play than you would for a traditional purchase. In fact, one of the biggest complaints about free-to-play is that they manipulate players to maximize profits. I mean, one of the knocks against Dungeon Keeper is that you have to keep putting money into it, otherwise the game gets super boring. The New York Times did this amazing profile everyone should read about Jorge Yao, the #1 Clash of Clans player on the planet. He He was spending $250 a week and playing on 5 different iPads to keep his #1 position. I mean, it got so bad, the game got so demanding that he had to put iPads in plastic bags so that he could play in the shower. Another problem with free-to-play is that it doesn't quite work with certain game genres. Braid designer Jonathan Blow, in a talk that you should totally watch, it's great, he said that the shape of the container determines what can be contained, which is totally true. Narrative games in particular don't work very well with free-to-play. In Gone Home, for example, if you had been let into the house for free, but then you had to pay for Sam's room, that would be really messed up. And buying a raccoon fur hat for Joel from The Last of Us would be amazing. He would be so dashing. But it would break the 4th wall of storytelling. Additionally, the free-to-play model might be ruinous for certain types of games, especially those where the designer needs tight control over the player's final experience. So that means artistic, beautiful games like Journey, or handcrafted puzzle games like Miyagakuri, or really tightly tuned RPGs like Dark Souls. Those games, it probably wouldn't fly. On the flip side, games like Team Fortress 2 have shown that the free-to-play model might work for something like Titanfall. And if you look at the MOBA genre, free-to-play has been used really aggressively with games like Dota 2 or League of Legends. I mean, League of Legends is one of the biggest games on the planet right now, and it's totally free. So while the model doesn't work in every single example, free-to-play as a concept is really important. I mean, video games are part of the cultural conversation. It's part of what makes us. They're just as important as listening to a pop song or going to see a movie, but they're way more out of reach. I don't really want video games to be just like golf, the exclusive province of the 1%, or the 5%, or whatever percent. I want everyone to be involved in the world of games, and in order for games to grow as a medium, as a culture, they have to be inclusive to people from all walks of life. And I fully admit, maybe free-to-play isn't the exact solution to the problem of income inequality that I laid out. Maybe it's something like PlayStation Plus, where you pay a small fee, and then you have access to a wide variety of games. Or it could be some kind of crowdfunding thing, where you support individual creators. I mean, that's what you do on Patreon. Or if you look at the stuff that Henry Smith is doing, he's running a Kickstarter campaign because he wants to make games for free in perpetuity. But he needs the public support to do it. Game designers are really smart people, and I'm sure they can figure out ways to incorporate free-to-play at a core level into their games that will be both financially and artistically fulfilling for them. Then we'd end up with games that everyone can play. Not just those with a $400 console. So what do you think? Should all games be free to play? Or do you think I'm the worst person ever for even suggesting it? Either way, you should hash it out in the comments. And if you like what you saw, please subscribe. I will see you all next week. Last week we asked whether or not JRPGs are having a comeback, and more importantly, if they need to actually be made in Japan. Let's see what you had to say. Jack Fahey and others asked why we didn't include Bravely Default in the episode. There wasn't like a particular reason not to, but it's worth noting that Bravely Default was a surprise success. I don't know if it's necessarily going to usher in this new age of JRPGs created by Japanese publishers, but I think the fact that it was a surprise only demonstrates my bigger point, which is that JRPGs don't have the same kind of crossover appeal that they once did. But maybe that'll happen in the future. I don't know. Max Euker makes the bold, audacious, and very short claim that the internet is nullifying the concept of nations. I think it's true in a sense, in that it's very easy to communicate with people across boundaries, as we've seen with the JRPG genre, that the fact that you're able to communicate across different countries, share different cultures, etc., etc. But I feel like as long as there are geographical boundaries that divide people up, different languages, and not to mention governing organizations that decide where the internet can and can't go, then yeah, I think the nation is probably going to be around for a while. But we'll keep waiting. Khaotic Gamer and many others of you took issue with my claim that JRPGs had died. Let me explain what I mean here. I'm not saying died as in the sense of being non-existent, right? So if you've been following that genre, you would know that there have been examples throughout the last 10, 15 years that would belie my claim. What I'm saying is that they had gone from a place of high popularity to a place of low popularity. So it's kind of like saying if LeBron James had left the NBA and went to play for some tiny little farm team in the Midwest, it would be technically accurate to say that his career was alive because he's still playing basketball, but for all intents and purposes, you would say that his career is dead. Jose Eusebio says that what's really happening here is a demonstration of the fluidity of genre, and asks this question, what is an RPG anyway? And I think he totally has a point. I think one of the challenges with games, because they are such a new format, or at least the way we talk about them is new, is that we have a hard time sort of describing what genre even really means in the context of games. I mean, if you look at other mediums, for example, there's fiction and then there's non-fiction. That's generally to be understood as kind of a divide, but even then there's gray areas between those two different places. But games are starting to build their own language language and the way we think about them in terms of what constitutes a specific genre is very, very much in flux. So it's an ongoing process. You're totally right. MandaloreT 4 leaves an amazing comment arguing that the games identified as sort of post-Japan JRPGs are not actually JRPGs, but what he would call simulacra. Well, not he, but postmodernists would call simulacra, which are essentially copies without originals. And basically something fits into a particular genre when it abides by or adheres to sort of stylistic connotations of that genre, which are some of the things that we mentioned in the episode. So like the soba bars, for example, or meditations on ritual suicide, some of these things that are sort of culturally defining points for Japan. He points to cyberpunk, which is a good example, that originally it started in a particular place that was a backlash against contemporary sci-fi, but then as it became popular, it sort of spawned all of these sort of imitators, so someone like Deus Ex or Shadowrun Returns, which wanted to harken back to a particular place where cyberpunk was, but they can't do that because over the long history of time, these things become referential, they start talking to each other. But his point being that you can't actually make a JRPG now because now the JRPG has been genreified, you can't actually go back to that place anymore. So yeah, it's a really thoughtful thing to say. Nazgul1002 asks if we can make an episode about the dodo bird. So sure, here's a dodo. Here's another one. This one's my favorite. Yeah, dodos, man, cool. Hey there, welcome. If this is your first time watching Game Show, you may have some questions about me and my glasses, specifically whether or not they have lenses in them. They don't, but if you go back to the very first episode, you'll see that the same exact frames do have lenses in them, and we took them out because it was distracting because of all the glare. But in real life, these are the exact same frames that I wear everywhere. I've been wearing the same frames for like the last 15 years. You can Google them. So either this is the most epic, long-running troll that predates Game Show and dates all the way back to my teenage years, or we just tried to make a change to make the videos look a little bit nicer. But it's your call.